Hello and welcome back. So today in my messy little studio here, I am going to be teasing you again with another little project. So I'm showing this is the one that I've been working on. So if you've been following along, I wanted to show that I have been working on it. I'm almost finished with this section that I'm going to actually do glue in the tutorial for you so you can see, but I'm so close to finishing this whole section. I wanted to get it done before I do this next video. So I am working on it, I promise. But in the meantime, I did let myself get a little bit distracted. If you're following me for the first time or watching this video for the first time, welcome. I think you will soon learn that I have a tendency to kind of bounce around a little bit. And I like to do a lot of different things, so you'll find a variety of different videos on my channel. But I wanted to kind of do another teaser video for this next series that I'm going to be working on. Apparently, since this is my second video teaser, I seem to have already started this series, even though I didn't really intend to until I finished that last book. So basically what I'm going to do for this new series is I have been making these altered book journals, and when I do that, I'm pulling out lots of pages. So I have a stack of book page paper, and this next series is going to be me trying to see how much of this I can use up in one journal. So that was my challenge for myself, and I would love it if anyone would like to come along on this crazy recycling project with me. So for the new book that I'm going to be making, I want to kind of use this color palette. This is the book that I had made, and I didn't do a tutorial about it because a lot of the things in here, it was the first time I had tried them. And so the altered book keepsake journal tutorial that I'm working on now is basically some of the ideas from this one in a tutorial form. So if you want to see this book just for fun, because it's beautiful papers, you'll see this just as a flip through. I'm only showing this to you now because I love all the colorful bohemian feel of this book. So my intention for my one that I'm making from scratch is maybe to use that kind of feel and colors. So I'm going to start with that. Now, I did decide on my journal that I'm going to make. I hadn't in the last teaser what I wanted to do for the cover, if I was going to use a from scratch cover or alter another book. But since the last couple of projects I've done have been an altered book, leaving the pages in and then just tearing out what you need, I had this cover that I had already gutted the book. So I decided I need to use this anyway, and I have a feeling that this book page thing is really going to be challenging for me. It would be fun to do some other new things. I've never actually put signatures in a blank book cover before, so not like this. So I wanted to try to do that. So that's why I decided to use this plain cover. I did like all the colorful nature of this one, so I thought what I would do is just kind of start this. Who knows how it's going to turn out, but I thought I would show it to you each layer along the way, just so you can kind of see how they start out and if you wanted to do something kind of like that. So that's kind of where my taking off point was for this. And then the other night I couldn't sleep, and I just wanted to start working with book pages just to see what I could come up with, and I was having some little different ideas. So I wanted to share that with you in case you've never worked with book page before and you want to do this challenge. I would at least kind of do little teasers and get you started so that you can kind of do some of your prep work even, because it's going to take a little while, I think, to get this all done. So I'm just going to start with what my first thought was, that I need to kind of figure out for all the different little things that I make. You'll see in other tutorials, I make little notepads and little notebooks and little pockets and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, each of those things requires maybe a different thickness of paper. And depending on how old your books were, they might be brittle or just real thin paper or whatever. So I think what we need to do first is I needed to do an experiment to get the different cardstock thicknesses. So if I want my paper to stay really flat, and not have bubbles and all that, I use just regular old Elmer's glue stick. There may be other brands. I know that if I've watched videos, I've maybe seen where people seem to have a lot more working time with their glue. So there may be brands that do that. You could let me know about that in the comment, because I am brand new to all this. And so I don't really know all the products. I'm always learning. So I use this one, and you can see where I live, it's very dry. This is that kind that turns white, you know, clear when it dries, and mine doesn't even let me hardly get the page together. So I always start just at the top, and I'm gonna, usually maybe a quarter or a third of the way, and then I just use a plastic card to get all the bubbles out. So I just might work my way down my paper that way, and in my dry climate, that seems to work the best for me. Like I said, I've seen some people, they can sit there and talk before they even put the paper together and it's still wet. So that's just what I do. So I use the little Elmer's glue stick, and these, you know, I like the big ones because they cover more area, but you can buy big packages of these, especially during back to school time. Okay, so that was just 2 thicknesses, and it's much better for anything, you know, even for little tags and stuff like that will work, little pockets. I wouldn't do just a single layer for a pocket, it's just gonna tear. So this is good for just easy things like that. And then I did a couple more experiments. I did, and that's the hardcover. I did one that is, where'd my other samples go? Oh, here we go. Okay, this one's that same 2 layers thickness, but then with 2 layers of gesso on it. So to do a primer, if you're going to be painting, watercoloring, writing, anything like that, where you don't want to see all the way the book page, you want to kind of have it be in the background, I use just this white gesso from Liquitex, and this has 2 coats on it. I just put it in one of my little disposable containers, you know, like little plastic thing, and I have a dedicated brush, that way I can pour what I need in there. So that's just 2 layers. Then I did one with 3 layers. This is a better thickness for like the notebook covers, the little notepads and stuff that I do. This is the good for that. If you wanted to do some embellishments that kind of made you feel like they come off the page a little bit, this is a good 3 thickness. And I would say it's kind of like a heavier cardstock weight. So this would be like a light cardstock, heavy cardstock. And then I did one with, I think this one has 4 layers maybe on it. So it's even a little heavier. I wasn't sure how many layers I would need to do for like my, I like to do these removable books. Like this one is a little doodle book that I might want to do it even thicker for that. Or even just if my signature's within my book, because I'm building my book into a blank cover, I might want each signature to be almost like its own booklet. So I thought, well, I want those to maybe be a little heavier. So I did the one with 4, and then I did one with 6 to see if I can get like a good book cover weight. And that is pretty thick. So I made one thinking it would be my pull-out book, but if you've seen my other pull-out books, they come out because they're just basically like a folio cover with the one signature inside, and then it's kind of tied into the spine of my other book where I can pull it out. Well, I'm limited to the size of my paper in this, you know, because I'm using old book page. So I had to come up with another idea, which I have in my head, I just haven't done it yet, of how to do that, where I make my cover hard, but then I have it solid in here, but just a fold so that I can stitch my book pages in. So I did that one, and then part of my idea involved sewing, and I made this too thick to fit into my sewing machine. So I think the 3 or 4 layer one would work for that. So I have to always kind of keep that in mind if I'm going to do some sewing on the cover, that kind of thing. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute, I think. So then the next thing I needed to do was, what about my insides of my book? Usually I just take a piece of paper and fold it in half for a folio and stack a few of those together. Well, my book would, if I did that, my book would be small. So if I want a big book, I need to come up with what's the biggest book I can do with book page paper. So what I came up with was, if I take a piece of paper, and you know, you might have book pages from larger books because maybe you've worked with encyclopedias or something like that. I mostly work in like Reader's Digest size books. I do have one that's a little bit bigger, but not much. So, you know, I'm kind of limited to the paper that I happen to have. So what I did was I know that my inside book that I want to make is going to be a little bit smaller than my book page that was in my book. And then the paper inside of that is going to be even a tiny bit smaller so that it fits inside of my little book cover. So I have a little bit of room then around my page. So what I did was I just cut the length that I needed them to be for the height of my page. And then I put them on my scoreboard and just scored a mark. In this case, it's 4 3/4, so that I have this little lip here that I can use. That way I have a seam where I can punch my holes to put it into my book. So I haven't glued any of these together. I did like a dozen pages that are just kind of alternating on top of each other. So like this one is inside this one. These almost get like almost feel like fabric after you've gessoed them. And then that one would alternate the next one. So they just alternate where the flap is. So I can glue these together if I want. They're gonna get stitched in, so I don't have to, but it might be easier for me if I do that. So I'll probably glue those together. So once I had all those, you know, ready with my score marks, I put 2 coats of gesso on each side, and I just used my heat gun in between so that it dries really fast so that I could work on the other side. The one thing I wanted to show you, though, that was kind of one of those happy accidents, was my paper, once I had the dozen done, were still kind of that cloth feeling and a little bit wet still. So I decided to iron them with my iron. And when I did, I loved the texture it gave it. Now, this one only has a couple of them, and I don't know if you can even see that, but there's like a little bubble. Did my iron flatten the bubble out? And I don't know if there was just more moisture in that paper already in those spots. I'm not really sure why it did it. One of them, it did it all over, and I just love that. And you can kind of see when I used my distressed oxide, it kind of highlights the edges of it. So I don't know, you could probably see that a little bit better. Anyway, I just thought that was really neat. I'm hoping I can duplicate that for some. So that was kind of my idea for my inside pages for a book, or even for like the little notepads. And I just did a test to show you. I just used a little felt pen, and you can write on it. I haven't tried it with like a gel pen, which is what I would normally like journal with or something, but these Unipen, these work great. So I know it at least works that you can just write on the gesso. So that's going to be the inside of some book pages. Now, when I first said that I wanted to do this challenge, I said no other kind of paper for the whole thing. And I may have a caveat to that, because originally I was saying, you know, not even magazines, because then you could just stick pictures everywhere, and that was just too easy. But I like to do like masterboard collages with catalogs, you know, catalogs and stuff like that. So I may say that that's okay, but I haven't decided yet. It just depends on how creative I can get with paints and that kind of thing. So I'm not, if it's a recycled thing, I think it's probably okay, because that's my whole point. My whole point was to recycle all this paper for this one. So I also might use, I've coffee stained paper for the inside. It's what I usually put in my little notepads and stuff, and different kinds of papers. I might use that to just the scraps though, because full pages, that's really kind of new. I mean, I just took a piece of paper and coffee stained it. So I do have a lot of little bits and pieces. So for little tiny notepads, that would be okay, because again, I'm recycling. So that was kind of my little rules I wanted to give for myself. Now, I wanted to share with you some other embellishment kind of ideas, or textural ideas and things to do using the book page paper just because I wanted to practice on some too. So one of the things that I came up with to do was I wanted to do some kind of lattice work. So I had done this little piece first, just a scrap, and this one, I didn't even cut the paper already. I already had a little bag of just that I saved when I had little strips that I've cut off before. So they were different sizes, and that was fine. But because I just wanted to practice and make kind of a little label thing. So I did that, and then I put 2 coats of gesso on it too, because I know for this one I want to do some slow stitching on. It's going to be part of a collage. So I wanted it to not look like the book paper. I wanted it to be a background where I can do some stitching. So I went ahead and did the gesso, and then I just used my Distressed Oxide Vintage Photo and just kind of did this just to kind of make my pattern in the background stand out. So now I can see my texture. So I like that. And you could do all kinds of stuff from here. You can stamp on this then, you know, stencil on it, whatever. I'm going to do some slow stitching on it. That's become my new addiction. So if you know me and you watch my videos or Facebook page, I often mention that I knit at night because I can't sit still. So recently I started doing slow stitching because my knitting inventory is way too big. So I wanted to find something else to keep my hands busy at night. So if you haven't done any slow stitching, it's basically like embroidery. And so I took out my embroidery threads. I don't use a hoop or anything. For this one, I just folded the paper in half, and I did put some fabric scrim glued inside because I was afraid if I got too detailed. I don't know if you could see that. There's this little scrim inside. You could use interfacing or something like that. I didn't know how detailed I was going to get, and if my holes are really too close together, I'm just punching the whole thing out, right? So I thought the fabric will help give me some like an interfacing, keep everything together, and it did. I like how that turned out. So I did another one where I didn't put any fabric in between. I just folded the paper in half. It's hard to even get apart now, so it's nothing in between. And then I just did, again, some slow stitching, just freehand on there. And then I think it would also be fine to either stencil and then use that as your pattern for some stitching, or like a coloring book. I have like a lot of mandala adult coloring books and different things like that, is to trace maybe your pattern and then do some stitching on it. These I just did freehand, just playing around with some different stitches. I think I might have shown these before, but anyway, that was kind of something I can use for embellishments. And when I did these were just me totally not even thinking about this book, just playing around with some embroidery. So these are probably going to be a small part of a larger thing, but I don't know what that will be yet. But that's just an idea. And then along that lattice idea, since I was there, I decided that it might be fun to make that lattice pattern be a texture on my book cover for that removable book. So since I had already made that practice cover and it was a little thicker than I wanted, I thought, well, let me try just a lattice one and paint it and see what that comes out. So I haven't finished this one. I did this one this morning. I just cut, for these, I cut 1/2-inch strips with my paper cutter so they would be even. Because it's a book cover, I thought it would be nice if I can make it all squared up and look good. But when I went to do it, I laid one strip out and then I did all the other ones the other direction and then kind of went from there gluing as I went. And it came out kind of wonky by the time I got to the end. So it's okay, I'll still use it even if I only use a portion of it. So I went ahead and glued on, actually with Mod Podge for this one, I think, I went ahead and glued on some more layers of just plain book page just to get some more thickness in it. And that I did do with Mod Podge. And then I did a layer just kind of to seal up the whole front. So I don't know what this will become, but I just kind of showing this because it's not as easy as it looks to not have it be wonky. So I came up with an idea that maybe would try to make it be a little bit straighter. So instead of doing one strip and then all the other direction, I just started at a corner and went one time each time. And I'm kind of starting to get off again, I can see here, so I kind of tried to even it up. But basically what I did, this one's too wide, is take a strip and do it just lay it all out first. The other one, when I did it, I was gluing each time as I went. And I thought, well, it might be easier if I get it all kind of laid out so that I know it's butted up to the other one before I start gluing. And then I just kind of lift one side, and this is just my Mod Podge. It's getting kind of dry here in my little thing. I have to do a shout out to one of my new subscribers who has left some comments because I find them helpful. So her name is Cindy Booth. Hi, Cindy. And I wanted to say thank you for your glue tips. I need to write them all down still and order those different ones to try. But Cindy had mentioned that she lives in a very humid area, and so she doesn't use Mod Podge anymore because it takes too long to dry. And I hadn't even thought about that if you live in, you know, a different climate, that glues will react different to your climate. So where I live in the high desert in Nevada, and it's very, very dry, especially this time of year. We actually have humidifiers going all the time because it's so dry here. So Mod Podge works for me, but it might not work everywhere. She says she lives in a humid climate, and she uses something called Collage Podge. And I have not heard of that, and I haven't seen it in a store. So you could go online, though. You might know about that. But that's what she uses in place of Mod Podge in her humid climate. So I wanted to mention that and tell her thank you, and keep the comments coming because they're really helpful. Now see, I'm getting wonky on that one too, but you get the idea. You just try to make it as straight as you can. It's handmade, and it's gonna look handmade. So anyway, that's how I did it. I glued them one side and then flipped it over, lifted and glued the other side. And then I'll just go the other direction till I have a full page. At that point, if I want to do any slow stitching decorative thing on here, if I want it painted, I would do the gesso, 1 or 2 layers, whatever, or paint it a color or whatever you want to do. You can ink it. This little bit is just inked with my Peacock Feathers Distressed Oxide. That would take a lot to get that whole page, so I'd probably paint it. But for little pieces like this, I like my ink just because I have it always out. So that worked. So if I want to stitch on this decoratively, whether it's with my sewing machine or by hand, I'm going to do that before I add any more thickness to it. So I will take this, this is really a layer, 2 layers really, because you've latticed it. So I'm going to take this, do my gesso, do any distressing if I want or whatever, and then sew on it, stitch on it by hand, whatever, and that'll be my cover. Then I will add other layers to it for the thickness I want, and then trim it up exactly to the size I need. I might do that before I stitch it, just because if I want to stitch the edges. So just kind of how my thought process is working. You'll get to see this. Who knows what it looks like when it's finished, but I wanted to share that as kind of a textural idea and show you the thicknesses. So I've done that. Then the other thing I wanted to show is I did come up with a couple of ideas for embellishments. The first one that I did was I thought of making like, I'm gonna get this in water here, is making some kind of what looked like fabric trim, like eyelet trim or lace, kind of thing. So one idea I had, which I haven't tried yet, is, you know how when you make snowflakes, you fold the paper and then you do little cuts and it makes it that snowflake lacy look? That is one idea that I've had that I didn't try yet. But I would do that with 1 layer of book page, do the accordion thing, and then iron it out flat again so you don't see that it had been folded to get that shape. So that is one idea. This one I did go ahead and finish because I wanted to stitch on it last night. If you saw my Facebook post yesterday, I showed pictures of these before they were all ready to go for my stitching. So basically this was I think it might be 2, I can't tell if it was 1 or 2 layers of book page. It's 2. So I did 2 layers of book page and then glued them together, obviously. And then I used for the edge, I used this, this little scalloped edge scissor to cut my edge. And then I just used, I have a flower punch that's this little flower punch. It's a small one. And I just went along at increments because I could kind of see where different spots to line up my little flowers. And when I punch those out, I end up with a lot of little flowers that I'm going to be able to paint and whatnot. So if you think ahead, instead of like I did, you can actually paint your paper first, whatever colors, and then punch the flowers out, and then you've already got painted flowers. So I didn't do that, so I'm going to have to paint these or something, or just leave them like that. After I punched my flowers, then I had all these little scallop marks. So I have 3 different size hole punches. This one is just your regular binder paper hole size. This one, if you can see how small that is, this one, I think, I'm not sure what the size they say, it might not be metric, but I use it for my 3mm eyelets. This is the punch I use for that, so it's around whatever that size is. And then I have a really teeny tiny one that I use too. So you get to, if you may have more of those sizes. So the more the merrier, right? So I use the big one, and then this one where the purple little French knot is, that's the medium size one. And then I actually, where these little knots are, I actually did the tiny one. When I did them, I punched all those holes because I wasn't sure what stitching I was going to do or not. So, you know, it is what it is. So I punched all the holes, and then I decided to do the painting or whatever on it. And I didn't really paint on that. I had just used the gesso first because I just wanted it to kind of stand out from being book page, just to kind of have the print in the background. And then I ended up, I think, doing another coat. You can't even tell it's book page anymore. I did that, and then to get that metallic kind of look, I used my Distress micro spray, and you have to shake this up because it totally separates. Here's another bottle. I don't know if you can see. It just looks like colored water, and then all of the mica, the metallic stuff, is down at the bottom. So you mix those up really good, and then you can spray them, or I sprayed it in this case, but I want to kind of show you what it looks like if you've never seen that. Let me get a blank piece of something here. It's just, I don't know if you can even see that. It's just kind of see-through, but it just gives you kind of that little metallic shimmer look. This is probably the color I use the most. This one's called Tarnished Brass. This is by Ranger. You can get it at Michael's or order it online. But it's the thing that I use when I want to kind of dull down or give a little shine to bright color like this. So this book actually has that spray all over the cover of it. I don't know if you can even see that, but it's, in real life you notice it. I don't know how well it translates on camera, but it just kind of tones down the brightness of those colors and gives you that little bit of shine. So I like to use that a lot, and that's what kind of gave me that metallic look for that background. And then actually, I think before I sprayed this, if I remember, is I used my vintage photo, and I kind of had it looking like this first. When you do that spray, see how it kind of all is blended? You're spraying liquid on something that is water soluble. So it does maybe make the ink look different. And then after that, I used my peacock feather one and went around the edges just for a little turquoise edge. There is another paper, that pink that's behind the flowers. If you can see that, I do have another paper that I attached. So this is kind of 3 layers now. And I took just that single layer of book page, and I used this paint that I wanted to show you because it's like magic. And it's funny because when I first started doing all this mixed media stuff, I would buy all these things thinking, oh, that's really pretty, not knowing what really it was meant for or what it would do. And so I go online, and this one is from Finnabar. It's called Opal Magic, and it really is magic. And they say this one is coral and green, okay? 2 colors of paint in there, but you see it's coral, it looks pink. So what it does is, the magic part, let me get a clean brush here with the towel. The magic part of it is, now I didn't mix this up good, I just shook it, so we'll see if it works. But the theory is that when you paint it, it's going to look different on black than it does on white. This is the closest place I'm going to have to show you that, but you just get a little paint on there. And I don't know if you can see, but when you painted it on white, it's that coral color. And painting it on, let me put it on this part's more black, it comes out green. Isn't that crazy? And it's that just shiny opalescent look. So, you know, it's going to do that on white, that on black, but of course on in between, it's going to maybe be something in between. I just love how that effect is because it's one paint, but it's different. So it's really, I just love that stuff. And it comes in different colors. I think I have maybe, I think I bought a set of like 4 pots it comes in different colors. So I used that. In fact, I used that, I believe I used that paint on this, on some of this book cover too. So I'll have to do that on my new one. So that's that pink. I just wanted, I wasn't sure how much embroidery I was going to do on that flower. And so I thought at least it could shimmer and have that really pretty color. So I ended up stitching a lot on this. Last night I did like a running stitch and some little knots and flowers and things. But I like how that looks. It's going to be cute as a band or an embellishment on the edge of a book or something. So there's that idea. And then you can also just take your regular book page and not do any gesso or anything on it. I just used my peacock feather ink around the edges, a little bit of the vintage photo inside, and stamped a word on it. So I thought that would be really cute. And I don't know how I'm going to layer these. I'm going to do some stitching on this one. So who knows, but I just like layering and collaging things. So then I made a little flower with a book page. And so the back, this darker colored one, this is actually, I just used something that already had some color on it. And then the top flower, that's 2 flowers, has just the book page. And that was with just this bigger stamp. So to make this flower, it's 2 of these big ones just alternated. And then one of the little ones that came out of that, that strip I did. And that little flower is with the copper colored Distress mica spray. So it's this copper one, just to give it some shine. And then the other 2, I didn't like them just being book page. So I went ahead and used some watercolor, my Neo colors on those. And where did those go? This is another product that I found that I love. They're not cheap, but these are Neo colors too. They're water soluble. I think you can get these Neo colors too that aren't water soluble. But I like watercolor things because I'm not an artist, and I find that being able to blend it with my water pen that I've showed before. I love this pen. It holds water, and so you don't have to like be dipping a brush all the time. The neat things about these, they're really soft and creamy, just like adult color crayons. So you can actually, even on your craft mat, just use as little as that amount, and then just mixing your water in it. Now you have watercolor. So it's just kind of neat. Am I in the frame? Yeah. So it's just kind of a neat way to do it. Compared to like cheap watercolors, you know, I bought like a little cheap set of kid ones. It's night and day. I mean, these are so responsive to whatever you want to do. You can color on something and do the same thing. So you can color on the paper and kind of, you know, make your little flower. See, that's how bad of an artist I am. But then you take these colors and it just kind of, it blends them all in. So even someone like me, you know, and you can mix different colors in, you know. They're very forgiving, I think, for someone who's not an artist. So for coloring, you know, doing coloration on things, just on the edges or whatever, I like those. So I did that little flower, and it's just, I used my little hole punch in just the center and used a brad. You know, you can glue them all together or not. They had, when I had them wet from the watercolor, and I think each of these flowers is 2 layers of paper. you know, so it gives you some sturdiness to it, which I think was good. When I finished this flower, it was all still kind of wet. I just used my heat gun, and that actually, when it dried it made it all kind of curl up. So I kind of like that because then it just kind of makes it pop off the page. So that'll be a cute embellishment. You can do all kinds of flowers. I take silk flowers apart. I don't know if you've seen, I know I make ribbon little things too, little flower floret things. That would be cute to mix all that in there. So if you've seen that, I've shown that in a video before. Actually, I think I showed all that in the first video of this little new series I'm doing. So then the other thing that I did was, I like mandalas and that kind of thing, mandalas. And so I have this punch that is 3.5 scallop punch. It's huge. And so I used that, and I just made 2 scallop circles. And the back one I did with my turquoise peacock feathers. I don't know if you can even see there's a little shimmer on there. I did the peacock feathers on just the back one solid, and then I sprayed it with my little shimmer spray that I use all the time. That's just that little fine glitter. Again, you have to shake that up because it's just really a fine, fine glitter. And then I'm doing some stitching on it. So the top one, scallop, was the same scallop. I did a coat of gesso on it, just one, because I wanted to see the words through there. And then I just used all my little punches, the 3 different sizes, all around it before I glued them together. And then, you know, the turquoise one lets you see them through. So I don't know how much stitching I'll end up doing on this. You know, it could end up getting, you know, part of a collage. I have no idea. But I thought it would just be fun to get a couple of things ready for my slow stitching. So last night I did all the little French knots around, and then I got nuts, and I'm gonna do all around this little edge. So that's gonna take a long time, but you know, it gives me something to do while I'm watching TV. So that's that, and I think that is all that I had. Is it all that I had I wanted to show? I think so. So I'm gonna get back to that other book that I need to finish and think about more little creative things, you know, different shapes you can make and different things that I can stitch on, because I like stitching now. And get your creative juices going here. If you come up with some ideas that you would like to share, feel free in the comments. I'd love to see what you come up with, and then it'll give me more ideas for my book too. So have a great rest of your day. Go make something. Bye.